Hi, I'm David King Lassman. This is another episode of ExploreXR, and today I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by the one and only Tess McKinney, the CEO and founder of X Renegades. And welcome, Tess. And let's kick off just a little background on you, please. Be great.
Yeah, can you still hear me there, David? Yeah, so I'm Tess McKinney and I run X Renegades, like he said. I have a background in technology and education. I started this kind of venture a few years ago. I was working for a healthcare facility at the time, and we were at a conference, and I kind of got into XR prior to that with some weird technologies and 360 tours and was at this conference, and there was a lot of people who were not utilizing VR, not using AR. They asked us to raise our hands. There was only three of us, and we were all using the same company, which I thought was strange at the time because you have your choice of software, and we had vetted like eight companies, so I knew there was a few out there, and I had a line after the presentation. I had a line up at my table, and they were like, "Well, where'd you find these software companies? Because we don't know anything about this. We don't know about the hardware." And I was like, "Well, that's strange." And to come to find out, it was behind a paywall. So that was the hardest thing. And then I started talking to these companies, and they're like, "Well, we're behind a paywall, and they're behind a paywall. We don't know how to get to them. How would we do that?" And so a friend of mine was like, "Well, you design websites, so why don't you just put everyone on a website, and then it's a collective, and anyone can go and see it." Sure, it didn't make some people happy about that, but I was like tired of, people being stuck behind paywalls to be able to see each other. So started posting different companies, and we started with six companies, and now the website has over 173. So there's a lot happening in the space. And so, yeah, that's kind of how I got here. And yeah, I just have, I kind of got into the right fields at the right time, I think. So
That's so cool.
I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. So interestingly, I know you relatively well. We've met a bunch of times at conferences,
Yeah.
and I think there are three pillars to your background that I think are really interesting. One is you've been involved in education for a long time, technology from the get-go, and of course healthcare as well, which is how we met, of course.
Right.
Of those three, does one draw you in a little deeper?
I think I don't know. I think they're all three kind of interconnect, but and healthcare is more of my main focus, now. My passion is education. So my mom's a teacher, my sister's a teacher. I worked in a lot of like K-12, where they had no money, and I worked in private education where they have tons of money, to spend on things. So for a long time when I worked in public education, it was that they had no money, and you had to do creative things with no money. So a lot of in my background is trying to find the best bang for your buck.
Mhm.
And so that's a big passion for mine. So for myself, so when I started this business, one of the things was to give back to education. And like K-12 especially, that in rural areas. So I live in a rural area. There's not a lot of they don't have a lot of funding. They get public monies, but it's divided. So people seem to forget about those small schools. So what I did when I started setting up headsets for companies and institutions that could pay for them, every 25 headsets, I give back a headset to the local schools. Just because they still deserve this opportunity, and just because they're not going to a private school or they live in the middle of nowhere, Nebraska, they should have the opportunity to see those kinds of things. And as I started to get into the education kind of realm with technology and with this kind of XR initiative, I found that kids don't even know what they don't know, and teachers don't know what they don't know or what they can't see because they don't have opportunities to go to conferences and see the cool technology. And we live in the Midwest, and so sometimes those kinds of technologies don't make it here. And so that's kind of my passion of trying to change that world and make um, make the Midwest maybe more of a technology magnet, I guess.
Yeah. I'd like to drill down a little bit further on that. If we think about technological innovation, education has been transformed right throughout
Yeah.
millennia, from the blackboard and how transformative that was to having
Yeah.
tablets and computers in the classroom. Two questions here. One is, what impact do you think immersive can have? Let's think about K through 12, right? What impact can immersive technology have in that market? And how difficult has it been to encourage teachers and institutions to adopt which is still a pretty nascent technology?
Yeah, so it's been kind of hard to have teachers kind of adopt this. I think it's a game changer for certain situations. Now, it's not going to replace like healthcare companies and institutions always ask, well, is it going to replace my mannequin simulation or is it going to replace my clinical situations? No. You still need those kinds of apparatuses and those environments to be in. Now, if I send a nursing student to a clinical and they're in Nebraska, they may not see something that's happening in South America or South Africa or those kinds of scenarios necessarily. So why not expose them to that kind of scenario in a headset? One of my favorites is that you have example like monkeypox. People just don't go around and they don't have that in Nebraska. So for someone to potentially recognize that someone may have this disease and not be able never have seen it or maybe never have learned, they may have come across it once in their life but they've never seen it in person. This is a way for them to identify that disease and that it's out there and that they need to learn about it. um, so it's putting them in a situation. So I think that's great for education. And like one of my favorite things, like that we just talked about at a K-12 school was the trades. So we have a lot of small rural schools who don't have like welding equipment or construction equipment, and they don't have access to that kind of stuff. But in a headset, they have access to all of it. They learned how to drive a forklift. They learn how to weld. And yes, while I want them at some point in their lifetime to be able to utilize the real tools, this is a way that they can do it on the cheap. I always say on the cheap,
Mhm.
um, or for an inexpensive amount, and still get that kind of experience and have that information. Because like we interviewed some eighth graders, and they're what they wanted to do. These are eighth graders, so they're graduating in 5 years. What they wanted to do was be a McDonald's general manager. And there's nothing wrong with that, but not every single one of them. There was like 40 kids, and maybe 20 of them were like, oh, we want to work at a fast food restaurant. Well, by the time they graduate, that may not be an option. That may be handed to robots. It's already been, AI is already kind of taking those jobs over. So, we need to prepare them for jobs that they potentially, will have in the future. And we the kind of cross connection of that is the technology is also needing people to be developers and to build those kind of applications that eventually, blue collar workers or white collar workers will go into. So it's kind of um, a double positive, I guess, having people, be experience this kind of technology to maybe get their interest just in technology alone, let alone the things that they could potentially do in their future.
Right. And I know it's fairly early days yet, but have you got any kind of data points, anecdotal or empirical, that point to those sorts of positive outcomes? I mean, it's particularly fascinating when you talk about eighth graders perhaps being, inspired to think completely differently through this technology. Are there any good stories that you could share about that?
Um, Man, I mean, we've just kind of implemented it. There's like whole schools that are now using it's so interesting because there's like I feel like my state's sometimes behind, but like whole schools in Florida, every single class that they go to, they utilize a headset. a long time ago, I worked for a company that we did like webinars, and like it was like learning webinars, and they learned a certain skill and then they went out in the world and did it. Um, I've always said, well, wouldn't it be cool if we had a headset in every classroom? And that's something that they picked up. The teacher was in it, because people are always worried the teachers will get replaced. I'm like, no, 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 don't replace the teachers, include them. I see schools right now banning cell phones. That shouldn't be something we do. It should be something that we help them understand how to utilize in class. And like, I mean, like these schools in Florida that every kid has a headset and you use it in every classroom. I mean, how phenomenal.
Mm.
Like that's something that it should be this extra, it should be just like our cell phones. Like there should be this extra thing that they can get into and they can learn more about whatever subject they want. And you're right, like see something that they may never see, in a classroom where they're sitting behind a computer that it just didn't pop into their brain.
Right. Okay, so let's come around to healthcare because
Yeah,
that's my
that's
big
our fun.
interest. That's our
Yeah.
fun. I think we probably first met about 3 years ago. Can you describe the difference in the healthcare sector today compared to how it was a while ago? What sort of rate of change, rate of adoption have you seen? Has it met your expectations? Is it fast enough? And so on.
Yeah, it kind of cut out there. So what was the first part of the question? Sorry.
Sorry, I'm trying to track the extent to which the market has changed in, say, the
Oh,
last
yes.
3 years.
Yeah, huge, huge change. So I remember thinking, so when it first kind of started, VR was, rudimentary. It was very hard to like distinguish things. There wasn't, a lot of scenarios. There was like maybe, a company had 5 scenarios and they're like, yeah, this is our bread and butter. Now people just have unbelievable scenarios and AI is kind of helping with that, kind of push that forward. But I remember thinking, I remember sitting with a patient simulator in the SimTech room and having the headset and having just a basic scenario and thinking, man, wouldn't this be cool if I could overlay it on a patient simulator and utilize it with it? That would be awesome. Well, now that's happening. And that's, kind of coming to life. And the 2020 kind of really made that a push, like really made VR kind of become this staple. But I really have seen, kind of the change between. I remember when um, I first had a HoloLens was, I don't know, 7 years ago, and thinking, oh man, this is going to get better, right? This is going to get better. Please, please get better. And evolution over time, obviously we know with computers and stuff things get better, but it's just become, where you needed a whole room to have your headset set up to, just being able to pop it on and go, and not really having to deal with like I remember I had to teach some people how to just get what to order for a graphics computer because they were like, well, I have this headset, but I have to plug it in and I don't have a graphics computer. How do I do this software? And I'm like, well, you don't like, and they're like, I have no, I'm a sim tech. I have no idea about computer computers and what graphics card I need, And so it's kind of evolved that now more and more IT is getting involved. I still have schools that don't have their IT is not involved, and that becomes a problem, So it's definitely moved over the course of time. And in healthcare alone, they seem more excited and things are getting more like approved. A lot of like nursing curriculum and that kind of thing or whatever and 2020 definitely helped with that. Um, but it's being recognized as a simulation and as something that you can utilize. I remember in the early days it was very rough and they were like, this is just a fad, this is not something this is just an extra, we just don't really need this. It's just something that looks cool and we want to utilize it because we want to be the first to do it or whatever. It wasn't really approved in their standards, and now there's so many nurses and nursing faculty who are were spending massive amounts of time and writing white papers on it and getting it approved kind of as an actual simulation and an accepted simulation.
Um, so that's focusing very much on how we train the professionals, right? And
Right,
it's very powerful, as you say, because it augments existing modalities of training, and can scale it, right? You don't have to
right.
bring people into a room around a mannequin. You can do this any way you like. I know that you're very close to the good folks at the VA, and they've got a fantastic campaign of getting heads in headsets, and they
Right,
really are standing behind this immersive trend, right?
right,
Their focus is very much on how VR and XR is driving patient outcomes. Um,
correct.
why do you think that is such a powerful medium for that? What are you seeing on the shop floor?
Yeah, so as far as like patients, I remember kind of the originals who were like, oh, let's do it for physical therapy and those kinds of drives, anything that regards like patients and making patients better. I think like while like the VA is very focused on the successfulness of that, there are others out in the space that are focused more on like it's just like every drug company, it's they're focused on the money and where is the most most money we're going to make. And so sometimes I think it gets lost with patients. I think we're starting to see some overlays with like surgeons and that sort of thing and how to help the medical professional make the patient have a better experience. I think a lot of people, especially like during the pandemic, were not really excited about going to the doctor anymore. They were confused and information came out that wasn't necessarily correct or wasn't correct in the minds of people. And so I think, this is a way that they're trying to help change kind of the narrative behind like physicians and, people who are there to help you. And so they're trying to, like, I don't know that I would go to a doctor who maybe didn't have this stuff if I was having a major operation. I want to be able to see what they're going to do in the surgery. Like, I think that's a phenomenal avenue to help patients. But I do think that there are some applications out there that are very driven by like insurance money and maybe tapping into that network and getting that kind of funding instead of going through the grant process and doing all that. Which why not? Like if you can get it in front of patients and it improves a patient's outcome, then you're the next best and brightest. And so that's a good push into why VRs is maybe succeeding in those kind of areas. But if you can make your patient better, they're going to come to you or
Yeah,
they're going to recommend you. So then that's just kind of a win-win for the whole medical field.
yeah. I guess
Um,
sorry, I
yeah,
think the
no, that's
insurance,
right.
I think the insurance companies will like it because if I can put a headset on a patient and it drives a positive outcome, that means I'm having to spend less on your medical care, and that works
Correct.
particularly well for something like mental health issues. They're tremendous
Right.
therapeutic applications that patients are being exposed to that are really quite transformative, or we're even hearing of things like surgical procedures being done without anesthetic because
Right.
somebody's in a headset. I
And
mean,
a
that's
headset.
that's incredible, isn't it?
And like for kids, that's a game changer to not have to put, or to prepare like one of my favorites is to prepare a kid for surgery or an MRI. It's a scary machine, it's a scary time. They're worried. And if you can make it so that it's not necessarily fun, but better, like I would love it if I could go to the dentist and I could wear something that makes me relax so that I don't, have to deal with the actual thing that's happening. I know like just back in the day, dentists tried like having you had an iced tea before you went in. So it's those kinds of opportunities that I think are definitely pushing the needle forward and helping their patients. Yeah. it's fantastic what you can do. Because like for me, I'm allergic to anesthesia. So for that to be able to happen, that's something that then I would choose that instead of having whatever they have to do to keep me awake
Well,
and go through that pain. But and it's not just physical pain, it's psychological pain. So you're reliving that moment over and over in your head, which that moment could be, on a beach somewhere.
mhm.
And so that would be fantastic.
Yeah. Can I bring the conversation around to mixed reality, which of course is again something that's very central to the way we're thinking about immersive.
Right.
Um, the the HoloLens for the longest time was the only mixed reality headset, and it was an expensive. It is an expensive device. Its field of view is quite narrow, as we well know.
Right.
Now we have things like the Quest 3 with its pass-through. How transformative do you think that functionality within a VR headset is, and how transformative will it become down the line? Is it something that
Yeah.
is going to make a difference?
It's yes. I think so. It's, when it was the HoloLens, it was kind of hard to move and expensive, and not everyone could afford it. And it was, only specific to one kind of software. So then it was, you had to build for it. Um, Now I think there's still some things that they need to improve on. It's not as robust as VR is. I still think, it's coming. But I think that they've really, with the Quest 3 and the Quest Pro, they kind of pushed that needle forward as far as like, having the opportunity to overlay a patient or having AI kind of be built into it and be able to do that. Like I I want to be able to see, a real person, but then also have that overlay. Like I cannot express how excited I will be when it's just a pair of glasses and I can put them on and I can go. I actually have nurses that are interested in doing that and like having every nurse have a pair of glasses so that they can like look up things and they can talk to a doctor and they can see, their patient, but be able to also talk to a doctor about their patient who may not be at their facility because they are in rural America or they're in, rural Canada and they can't really get a hold of anyone and there's no one on site. That's something that potentially could be a game changer for a patient and a patient outcome, if you're in an emergency situation and you don't know what to do in that situation. So I think those are the kinds of types of success stories that there will be. I don't really see any downfalls, for it. I think you guys' product does really, really a robust job, and you're kind of, yeah, it always seemed like you were ahead of the game because you were with the HoloLens and you're kind of waiting for that next headset. And so with the Quest 3, and I think they did a really good job with the Quest 3. Now, like the Apple Vision Pro, I think it's great, but you can't see peripherally, and that's a problem. So hopefully someday that gets fixed. Like I
Mhm.
said, there's some additives that need to happen before it's as robust as being utilized for surgery and that
Yeah.
kind of thing. But I mean, things are happening. There are already people utilizing headsets, HoloLens and Apple Vision Pro for surgeries just to help the doctors, not necessarily to help the patient, but you know, it in turn helps the patient. So
Yeah.
I really like, mixed reality. It's, with the Quest, it really that price point is a lot better.
Mhm.
And so I think more people will start to afford, well, now it's kind of a forced because we don't have the Quest 2 and we don't have the education model yet. So now it's kind of a forced thing, but I think people are very interested in that. They really want to see how they can utilize it with their beds that they already have like set in stone in these rooms, and especially in like training facilities. They really want that because they don't want to have to. A lot of times with VR, they had to remove some of those like patient beds or patient um, you know hospital care rooms or whatever. They had to remove all the furniture just to have the VR, and they don't really want to do that. So I think this is becoming a game changer for those
Mm.
kinds of
Yeah.
institutions.
Have you had much experience of putting the Quest 3 or other headsets that have passed through onto people, what's the reaction that you're seeing on the ground? Um, do they like the mixed reality more than VR, or are they blown away by it? What are you seeing? What are you?
Yeah, and it's interesting. So, most healthcare, big healthcare facilities, they're just getting into the VR, so they aren't really. I've seen a few that are like, oh, there's what is this mixed reality or what's extended reality, and they don't really they aren't fully grasping like what is available. I mean, like at all, I think there were 75 different headsets now. I mean, like, and that's kind of what when the confusion kind of happens, but. I think the people who have tried this with XR in healthcare and who want this, they're like blown away. I had a lady who came in and she wants all these headsets for her nurses and she wants to be able to have them readily available so that they can get in and, have those kind of connections. But I think it's a game changer. I've had people ask for years, when are they going to do an overlay? When are they going to have a patient simulator overlay? And I'm like, I just don't know. Like, there's so many different companies doing this. We kind of have to wait and see and see how robust it is. And, so I think, especially like GigXR, you've done that and you have those kind of opportunities. Um, to have that overlay, and now I think it's more affordable. That was the kicker, is like having like a $3,000 to $5,000 headset for one person when they have 45 students in a class. That just didn't really work. But now with like the Quest and having it more affordable, I think or the Focus, the Vive Focus, I think it's more affordable for people to pick up and be able to go. Plus it's easier. So that was another always a question, is people were like, this is hard. I don't know how to do this. I don't have time to do this. I just need something I could pick up and students can do, or nurses can do on their own.
Mm,
And so kind of having, just a basic description is super helpful with that. But
yeah.
I'm blown away by mixed reality. I love it. I love playing golf in my front room, and like being able to like hit it through the windows, but not really. That's kind of fun or whatever. And being able to, I have some people who are experimenting with new kinds of technology, utilizing it. So being able to be outside and utilize it, being able to not have to be in a grid necessarily because you can see where you're going, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
And so, and not having to have that space dedicated for that VR, and to just be able to go into any space and kind of set your boundaries up is very a functional product.
Yeah, I agree. You touched on something I think that was quite interesting, that uh, people don't know that they want this, uh,
Yeah,
and we have a job to do, uh,
to get it.
educating, right? What could we do better as evangelists and enthusiasts of extended reality? What could we do better to promote it to the communities that we know need it most, like the healthcare sector?
Yeah, and that's like a hard one. So I like actually, so I thought I'm doing all these, advertising on LinkedIn, and I post a lot of times, and I try to post in forums that people ask like questions about, like, we don't know anything about VR, how do we get into it? And then I'm like, well, here's XR, you should take a look at that. And they're just blown away. As far as like getting out and like what I would like to see with some of like the companies with XR is having that kind of, and I know this is probably expensive, but having that space, like a patient room or a simulation room, but like having a bed there or having a patient simulator there that you can overlay and that you can work with. Doing demos. Like I have some companies who won't do demos. I'm like, how do you sell your product? They're like, they buy the product first and I'm like,
Yeah.
nursing, they don't want that. They want to try it before they buy it.
Mhm.
A lot of times, like I like people call me and they'll be like, well, we don't have a headset. We have no idea what to buy. And I'll just send them a headset with demo software. Making that kind of concerted effort because they're interested enough to take a look at your product and to contact you. So having that, just that little, I mean, like Quest 2 is $200. So it's not much to have to send that out. And yes, it might get damaged, but for the most part, these people are really careful and they're in
Mhm.
healthcare. So they have way more expensive products to have to worry about. So it's just kind of getting boots on the ground. I think going and doing like live demos in person are fantastic. I mean, even if they aren't paying you at some point, they will pay you because they want their software. Um, it's just getting in front of them. Like, I remember the IMSH that was like, I think it was 6 years ago, and really three people had utilized software, and it was only because that software that was there, and there was only one booth. But I think people don't realize that there are those conferences. Like example for I go to those conferences, but nurses don't go to those conferences. They're not going to go to a whole technology show, about all this different kinds of technology. That's not where they're focused. IMSH and those kinds of conferences, but there's small conferences too that, need to be um, people need to be at. But not everyone can go to conferences either. Because I had a lady who wasn't on LinkedIn, didn't have any affordability to go conferences, and she ended up finding me through someone else that she just happened to talk to, and they were like, yeah, you should really talk to this person about any kind of technology. And it was just random. So you're not going to reach everybody, but going into hospitals and just doing demos, like they have rooms that, a lot of hospitals have salespeople from drug companies come in and show them products or whatever, and they've been doing that for years. That's something that like some of these software companies need to do.
Mhm.
And if they're afraid of, meeting someone, then that's a problem. So just as much as you can, try to get the word out. But
Yeah.
um, that's the demos. Or I had a whole room full of like people coming to do demos at a community college. It was fantastic. The people's faces lit up. There was all these different opportunities and cool things to do. And, even faculty who were like kind of shy about it and were like, "Ooh, I don't know if I want to get in." At least they could see it. So we had like a monitor up, and so they could see it. And then they saw their coworkers smile. That's the best part.
Mhm.
Like you have someone who's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna get in it." And their coworkers who are their friends are like, oh, well, if they did it, maybe it is worth it.
Mhm.
So kind of doing that kind of stuff, giving trainings, like that's probably my bread and butter kind of around here is giving trainings just to kind of open someone's eyes about what there actually is
Yeah.
out there.
Okay. Um, Thank you. That was a great answer. I know on your profile you describe yourself as a futurist, which I love.
Yeah.
Um, so in your role as a futurist, um, what do you want to see in our community this time next year?
Oh yeah. Um, well, I went to see, so I went to a conference earlier this year and someone actually gave me that title. I made sure I didn't put it on my thing until someone actually said, "Well, I think you're a futurist." And I was like, "Great, finally." But the thing that I want to see is I think we all are this very tight-knit community and we do a lot for each other and we support each other's software because we're not there yet. We're not over the cusp. There's still a potential that we could fail. Um, and like while XR is widely accepted in a lot of our kind of groups, and it's starting to kind of be, somebody said earlier this year, oh, this is the year for healthcare. And I'm like, well, the last 4 years felt like the year for healthcare. It still needs to be built up and it still needs to be recognized as a new technology. I think if we continue to keep building upon what we are and we keep supporting each other, because I know there's like competitors, obviously, but in some sense, we all support each other so that we can move forward. It really reminds me of when computers kind of first came out. and it was Apple versus Microsoft, so it was, or Apple versus Windows, and it's always kind of been like that. But they had to support each other in order to progress forward. I think, I hope to see some companies kind of maybe partnering together more, especially with some of this niche software. So like the niche markets of like, whereas you could develop something yourselves, there's people who've already developed it specifically. Like if you had like infection prevention, it's a super small market. And like it's not something that maybe, the bigger companies like your company or those bigger companies are going to really create another platform for. They're not going to. But like if people could partner together and push, that forward, that creates a better ecosystem and a better solution for the people out there. Because like I think what I see happening a lot is schools and universities and institutions feel like a long time ago, like with simulators, they only buy one. They buy one kind and that's it. So you're either a Mac school or you're a Windows school, or you're not really both. You don't really ever do that. And so I think a lot of people out there are confused that they should only buy one system when they probably shouldn't, because you all have different solutions that or problems that you solve. I think, it needs to come together where people are informed that there are multiple solutions out there and there are reasons why you select the solution. There's a reason why people select your solution. There's a reason why people select VR, but maybe you should have them all, or you should have multiple ones. That's kind of where I see things hopefully going.
Mhm.
I also hope they keep developing headsets that become cheaper and cheaper and cheaper,
Mhm.
um, especially for like K-12 education because it's really expensive.
Yeah.
But I think we just need to still keep pushing over the hump. We're not there yet. I did have somebody say, "Oh yeah, we've made it. We've crossed that path," and I'm like, in certain situations we've crossed that path. Like I think XR is here, or VR XR is here to stay, but not everyone is widely adopting it. It's still that small, like only if I got a grant or only if I have a champion. It's not like every school on the planet's buying it. They're not.
Right, right, right. Yeah. So we
So
need we need to see institutions sort of baking it into their budgets, making it part of the
right.
system,
Yep.
not an
Having their
accessory.
students pay for it, or, building it in student fees, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that hasn't happened yet, hasn't crossed that threshold. So
Right. Right. Well, I think on behalf of everyone in the community, I want to express my thanks to you for helping drive that agenda. I know it's hard work, and you work tirelessly on behalf of all of the vendors and, of course, the institutions that we serve. So thank you for that. And I look forward to seeing you at the next conference.
yeah.
It'd be good to catch up in person. Tess, I'm really grateful for your insights and thoughts here on immersive and XR. All it remains for me to say is say thank you and speak to you soon.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. This has been great. I hope I can help more people. I just, like you said, I've just been trying to post as much as I can, and I really believe in this community. I really think it's the way forward for education and healthcare.
And that's a beautiful way to end it. I'm David King Lastman. This is Explore XR.